You care deeply about doing good work. You have high standards. You notice details other people miss, and you hold yourself to a level of quality that honestly has served you well. And somewhere along the way, that same quality that made you good at your job started making your job miserable. Today, I want to talk about perfectionism at work, not as a, character flaw, but even a humble brag, but as a specific nervous system pattern that has a real cost and a real solution. Because the version of perfectionism that's quietly sabotaging you isn't about standards, it's about fear. And those are two very different things. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Workplace Therapy with me, Dr. Abby Metcalf. So, what is perfectionism at work really? What am I talking about? I always like to start with definitions. And perfectionism is often described as having high standards, but that's really not quite right. High standards are healthy. They are functional. I'm all about high standards. Perfectionism is what happens when high standards get tangled up with your self-worth, when the quality of your work becomes the measure of your value as a person, and when anything less than exceptional feels not just disappointing, but threatening. I know you're nodding right now because that's what I'm talking about. Researcher Brene Brown, who we've all heard, but I really like her definition, so to speak. She distinguishes between healthy striving and perfectionism this way. She says that healthy striving is self-focused and asks, hey, how can I improve? Perfectionism is other focus and asks, what will they think? And I love that because that distinction matters just enormously in life, but in a work context, especially, I think, because it tells you what's actually driving the behavior. When you're refining something because you genuinely believe it can be better, that's craft. When you're refining something because you're terrified of how it'll be received, that's perfectionism. And it activates a completely different part of your brain. And that's why it really matters. We psychologists classify perfectionism in two broad types. There's adaptive perfectionism, which involves really high standards paired with the ability to feel satisfied when those standards are met, to learn from mistakes without catastrophizing, and to really recognize when good enough is genuinely good enough. But maladaptive perfectionism, that's the kind that sabotages. That involves standards that are never actually met. I see you. Chronic dissatisfaction with your own output and a relationship with mistakes that feels more like evidence of fundamental inadequacy than information for improvement. Okay? Yeah. Already you're nodding your head. I see you. So why is perfectionism a nervous system problem? It is the next thing I want to answer. And that's because at its core, that maladaptive perfectionism is it's a threat response in disguise. That's what it is. When you're a perfectionist in that maladaptive, unhealthy sense, your nervous system has learned to treat imperfection as danger. That's a problem. A mistake, a piece of work that falls short, somebody criticizing you, a deadline you're not sure you can meet. These all register as threats in the same way a physical danger would. Your amygdala starts to fire, your threat responses gets activated, and then really only one of two primary things happen. One, some perfectionists respond with overdrive, right? The compulsive checking, the redoing, the refining, the inability to submit or ship or whatever you do, give or share your project or whatever your work product because it's not quite right yet, right? This is fight mode sort of directed inward. You're battling the work rather than the threat because the work is like the what's the word I want to use here? It's like the proxy for your safety. The other other side is other people respond with avoidance and procrastination. I see you too. The paralysis that looks like laziness, but is actually the freeze response, right? So basically, you're going into either a fight or flight response or a freeze response. And if you don't start, you can't fail, right? So if you don't submit, you can't be judged. If you don't give it in, if you don't submit the work or whatever, you can't be judged on it. The threat response has calculated, has figured out that inaction is safer than the risk of imperfect action. And it's overriding everything else, which is really the problem. So both responses share the same underlying structure. That's the deal. The threat isn't the deadline or the project. The threat is the possibility of what? Of being found inadequate, of them figuring out you were scamming them all along. I work with some amazing, amazing people who are top of their fields. Incredible. People have been at their jobs for years, have been promoted and promoted again and again, all kinds of things, and still feel like somehow there's like someone's going to figure out that they really don't know what they're doing. And I'm always like, they would have figured it out by now, And what's interesting is the people who really don't know what they're doing don't have imposter syndrome ever. They don't have this imperfectionism thing. They don't have any of it. They're just doing their thing, kind of oblivious. So the fact that you even think it usually means that you're probably way better than you think you are. But so your nervous system is trying to protect you in the only way it knows how, which is through, again, one of these two things, either kind of fighting and getting too perfectionistic with something or completely opting out, right? So where does workplace perfectionism come from? Like, where is this from? And it comes from the same place most nervous system patterns come from. It was learned. It worked. At some point it worked, but now it's outlived its usefulness. Okay, that's what you have to know. So for many perfectionists, this pattern has roots in environments where conditional approval was the norm. Love, recognition, safety, whatever. It depended on your performance. So getting things right kept the peace, earned you attention. But making mistakes had very real consequences, right? So your nervous system learned being good enough isn't safe. That's what it learned. Excellence is the only reliable way to feel protected and safe. And sadly, because I've worked, I am an organizational psychologist, right? Workplaces really reinforce this pattern in specific ways. So those high achieving environments often reward perfectionistic behavior. They do. When I work with these C-suites, or I work with these executives, or I work with these CEOs, I'm constantly letting them know, like, you're creating something you don't want. They love the extra polish, the exhaustive preparation, the inability to let anything go. But there is such a huge cost, because cultures that punish mistakes more than they reward learning, and that's the only way to learn is by making mistakes, create exactly the conditions where this maladaptive perfectionism thrives, okay? And also where we get into a lot of problems. Hello, Enron and other places, right? And again, over the last 35, 40 years, I've really watched a lot of companies and people inadvertently cultivate perfectionism while wondering why their best people were burning out or leaving. Hello. There's also an identity piece. I want to say that. So for many high achievers, being the person with high standards, quote unquote, it's like a core part of how they see themselves and how others people see them. So letting go of perfectionism can feel like letting go of the thing that made you valuable, which is why even if you understand intellectually that your perfectionism is costing you, you can find it very hard to actually change. That's where that comes from. I know. I see you. I love you. So what does perfectionism cost you at work? I make this point a lot with my clients, and the executives I work with, and the teams, I want you to hear this. This is real. And this I know really well because I've had to repeat it so many times because it costs. And it's more than you usually realize, that the perfectionists I work with realize, and definitely in directions you probably don't expect. The most obvious cost is time and energy, right? Perfectionism it's inefficient. It's not efficient. The time spent on the last 5% of polish that nobody else is going to notice is time not spent on the next thing that actually matters. That's the problem. And there's research on this. And for any of my new listeners, anytime I say research, or I do have a great free download for today. Anytime I talk about that or past episodes I've done, you can find all of that below the video if you're watching on YouTube, or you can find it on the website. Just go to the episodes, just go to this episode, and I write a full blog. And that's also good if you don't want to take notes right now, you just want to listen, but you want notes, you can go back later and just copy and paste from the blog. So there is research on productivity and diminishing returns, right? And it consistently shows that the effort required to move from very good to perfect is disproportionate to the value you create. And that the cognitive cost of perfectionist, what I want to call it, rumination, all that thinking, compounds that inefficiency significantly. Okay. So you're hurting yourself getting from very good to perfect. You really are, on a personal level and on a work level. The second cost is, speed and opportunity. Perfectionism, it slows you down, which means you miss windows. And there's, most organizations move pretty fast. So in those fast moving organizations, the person who delivers something good quickly, they will outperform the person who delivers something perfect late. I'm telling you right now. I see it all the time. Done is almost always worth more than flawless. Just telling you. The third cost is creativity and risk-taking, right? Perfectionism and genuine creative risk, they're totally incompatible. I'm telling you that right now. Forget it. Because creativity requires the willingness to produce things that might not work. If your nervous system is treating every imperfect output as a threat, you're going to unconsciously stay in territory you've already mastered, rather than attempting things you might fail at. And over time, it's going to create a really specific kind of stagnation that's very hard to see from the inside. It's going to be very hard for you to see, but trust me, the people around you are going to see it. And you're going to find yourself really falling behind with technology and other things. And I'm telling you, it's a problem. I say a lot, ready, fire, aim. And perfectionists, of course, are ready, aim, fire, but they often don't fire because they're so busy aiming. And that's how it's going to be. And really getting in your head, I remember, because I am a recovering perfectionist. I really, really am. I could spend 19 hours on one podcast. And trust me, I would not be finishing, I've got 8 full years of my other podcast, and this I'm already in season 3. This is next to the last episode. There's no way you keep something so consistent and you're a perfectionist. But I would say, I don't know, I get a lot of positive feedback about my stuff because I've really learned this. And so I feel your pain. I love you. I feel your pain, but it's got to change. So sorry, let me finish that thought. So what I noticed is that I would put up the website, and my first website was terrible, right? Compared to the next ones, but you got to get it up, whatever it is, right? My first episodes of the podcast, I'm not proud of them. I don't think they're amazing, but I learned and I got better, and over time, right? All this stuff improves over time. I even see first videos I did on YouTube or something, where I'm spending too much time explaining who I am and whatever, not getting to the point. You get better at things. That's how it works. You learn and you get better. You get more comfortable, all the things, and you get more creative. So, and the fourth cost is the one that I think compounds in a really sneaky, insidious way. And that's your relationship with yourself. And that's the most important. right? Perfectionism is exhausting to live with. That chronic dissatisfaction, the inability to feel genuinely proud of your work, the internal critic that finds the flaw in everything. These aren't just unpleasant. It's like a slow erosion of your confidence and your motivation. And good work requires confidence and motivation. So you're just melting it away. All right. So let's talk about the 3 shifts that change a perfectionistic pattern or perfectionist pattern, however you want to say that. And I talked extensively on the Relationships Made Easy podcast about how to stop being a perfectionist so you can start being happy. I think that's what it's called. So if you're sitting here nodding your head a lot, go check out that episode. I'll link to it, but for now, I can tell you that you don't change a perfectionist pattern by lowering your standards. That's not how it happens. That framing is part of what makes perfectionism so hard to address, because it sounds like you're being asked to care less or do worse work, right? And that's not what this is. If anything, again, I would say that I am so much better at my work now that I have given up on the perfectionism. Given up. Okay. Mostly given up, 90% given up. And my standards are very high. I very high and that's why I have such a huge following, I think, because people have seen that standard over time. Right. But what used to take me, 10 hours to produce like one episode now is 3. And manageable, right? It's manageable to have 3 hours a week devoted to something, and very specific and very clear. Because trust me, I could always spend more time making this better. And when they're out, I'll look at them and I'll be like, oh, I should have talked about that research. And oh, I should have talked about that research. And what I do now is I make notes I make these notes in the thing and I put it in this folder I have where I'm like, oh, I'll do this again in the future better, right? I'll add more to it. It doesn't mean this broadcast right now is bad. It's great. I think it's great. But it does mean I could shift, show a little more, have another angle next time, right? That's all. So anyway, you want to focus on shifting a few things. So I want to say this. The first shift is separating your standards from your self-worth. Okay? You have to shift your standards from your self-worth. Your work is something you produce. It's not who you are. And I know this sounds simple and it's genuinely hard to practice because your nervous system has been confusing and conflating the two for a very long time. So a useful exercise here, I think, is after you complete something, ask yourself 2 separate questions. First, is this work good? This is something I do, just so you know. I ask myself, is this work good? And then the second question is, am I a worthwhile person, regardless of the answer to the first question? And the goal is to hold those as genuinely separate questions rather than the same question, in different clothes, right? Okay. The second shift is developing a relationship with good enough. That isn't a compromise. And this is the thing. Good enough doesn't mean mediocre. I'll tell you that right now. It means fit for purpose, literally. That's what it means, fit for purpose. The level of quality that actually serves the goal without accruing unnecessary costs. That's how I want you to think about it. Getting clear on what done looks like before you start a piece of work is, I have to tell you, one of the most practical tools I will ever give you. Not the ideal version, not the dream version, the version that accomplishes the actual objective. Okay. So again, for example, with my podcast, I've been told before, it's like, oh, you have to keep the podcast shorter. People don't listen that long. You have to keep it at 15 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour or whatever. And when I used to try to do that, I was crazy. And guess what? I wasn't putting things out. I started this podcast, tried to start it 2 years ago, and I couldn't quite. I was also trying to do like a stand-up thing where I was teaching from a board. I was trying to do it different. I paid someone to come to my house and set up a studio with lights, and none of it was happening, people. none of it 2 years ago. That's why you didn't see the podcast. But a year ago you did, because you know what I did? I was like, you know what? I'm going to use the same thing the same system I already used for my other podcast that's so successful. It's not going to look different. Maybe in the future I will do the other way. Maybe I'll get there and I'll make it better, I hope, over time. But right now it was like, I want to get the information out. And you know what? They're as long as they are. I try to have the point, make my points, and if it's a little longer or a little shorter, it is what it is. I don't let time dictate, and you'll listen or you won't. That's how it goes. But again, that's how to get past all the perfectionist stuff. The third shift is changing your relationship with mistakes. Oh, yeah. Maladaptive perfectionism treats mistakes as evidence. And the reframe that helps is treating them as data, not evidence. What happened? What can I learn from it? What would I do differently in the future? That's a completely different internal conversation than what does this say about me, or what's wrong with me, or what's my problem. The first is information, right? The second is a threat assessment. Your nervous system responds completely differently to how you approach that. It's the same thing if you ask yourself, like, oh my God, what was I thinking? Oh, what was I thinking? Versus what was I thinking when I did X or Y, right? Very different nervous system response. And of course, you're rarely going to get through an episode without me mentioning what? Drum roll, mindfulness. Because I have to tell you, perfectionism is one of the most direct applications of a consistent mindfulness practice that you can have. Because mindfulness, as we know from the research, reduces amygdala fear-based reactivity, which is where that threat response that drives perfectionistic behavior lives. And it also builds a capacity, which is, I think, the most important, to observe your own thoughts, including the perfectionist ones, without being immediately, commandeered by them. So that's always what we're looking for. And I have the free mindfulness starter kit if you don't know where to start, but go get it. So let's talk about the bottom line. I'm going to talk about how to put today's lesson into action. So perfectionism isn't about high standards. It's about a nervous system that learned to treat imperfection as a threat to your safety and worth, right? So there's 3 shifts I mentioned: separating standards from self-worth, developing a real relationship with good enough, and changing your relationship with mistakes from evidence to data. All work at the level where perfectionism actually lives, rather than at the level of the behavior alone. Again, your standards do not have to go down, nor should they. Your nervous system's relationship with not quite perfect, that's what needs to change. Okay. So again, putting today's lesson into action, I have, what do I always say? Information's great, but until you take action, you don't got much. So there's a free, what did I create for today? I created a free download. It is the Perfectionism Reset Tool. It's a quick guide to catching the pattern in real time and redirecting it toward the work rather than your worth. That's what it does. So you can get that. And to be always transparent, if you download anything from me, you'll be on my free Love Bites list, which means that only twice a month, you will get an email with a little inspirational story or, I don't know, little something I write. I'm not selling you anything. There's no here's what I'm doing this week. None of that bullshit. It's just a little, it's meant to help keep you motivated. That's all it is. It's nothing. I know these days it always feels like there's a catch. There's no catch. It just is. And if you don't try it. See, I've got tens of thousands of people on that list because people love the love letter. The Love Bites, it's called. They love getting it. They feel good about it. They have a different way of thinking after they've read. It's like a 5-minute read. It's nothing major, but it's just a little something to help you. And if you don't like it, though, unsubscribe. I won't know. There's a lot of people on there. I'll have no idea. So, but I always want to be transparent about what happens. Obviously, I never give away your emails or anything like that. All right. That is it for this week. There's only one more episode in this season. I'm really excited. And 2 more. Sorry. There's 2 more episodes in this season. And then next season, season 4, which will start sometime in August, I'm actually going to focus on management. How do you like that? So that's it. All right. Have an amazing week, and we'll talk real soon.